Good afternoon. Welcome to Northwestern Oklahoma State University's Video Guest Artist Lecture Series. Today we are joined by a wonderful painter, visual artist, and professor, John Sabraw from Ohio University. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, John.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
And so I will just let you take over from this point on, but I would like you to talk about your background, how you got into art, and how you got to where you are today, and what you're working on currently with your series. So
Sure.
Please have at it.
You bet. Thanks, man. Well, if anything goes funky, if the images aren't really showing or anything else, let me know, and then we can stop and go back. I'm going to try to do a screen share and do a lecture for you, all right?
Okay. Can anybody hear okay? Just a little bit? Okay.
Okay. So right now on your screen it should show John Sabraw Resonance. Does that show that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank God. Okay, good. Well, hello everybody. Thanks for coming. Although you were already there, so really I came, but electronically. So, So Resonance is the name of a show that I have going up in a couple weeks in Chicago, and it has 32 paintings in it. So that's what I'm freaking out right now in the studio doing, and I'm talking to you from my studio in Ohio. I want to start out with a little bit of background, give you a little bit of a biological background, and then head into some bio, and then into some science, then into some art, and maybe into something that has to deal with you, college students, right now. So Eyeballs from Hell is the first section, which really deals with the fact that I'm from the very shallow end of the gene pool. I was born with eyes that go all different directions, and they never work together. So I always saw the world in a very, very different way. For me, I could only see two things. I could see things very, very, very far away, like stars and galaxies, and I could see little tiny things like aphids on leaf, pieces of leaf or something like that, and everything in between didn't make much sense to me. My father was Air Force during the Vietnam War, so I spent a lot of time watching families lose fathers and other kinds of things, and that colored a lot of my concerns for the world. Caught right in the middle of worrying about people dying from being in a war and dying in plane crashes, and also people protesting for human rights around the world, and why were we there in Vietnam in the first place. Really set up this kind of tension for me as a human existing on the planet. So part of the issue, as I mentioned, was other humans. Being a weirdo and basically with my eyes not functioning correctly, everybody who was, everybody who was actual human in the rest of the world was a mystery to me, and it was very difficult to figure out for me how to get along in a way. So I went to Pratt Institute in New York, in Brooklyn, because I grew up on military bases, so that was kind of all over the place, like all over the country. In fact, I was born in Lakenheath, England. And so for me, no place was home. I didn't really understand much of anything about the world. And actually growing up, I grew up in Lawrence, Kansas for while I was in high school. Some of you might know that. It's reasonably close to where you guys are, like one state away-ish. As long as you skip Wichita, I think you'll be all right. And when I was there, I actually basically pretty much failed high school completely, and was getting Fs and everything. And I wasn't from a place where people became artists or anything else, so I have no idea that that was going to be a thing. But when my art teacher actually took my artwork and applied to some schools for me, and I got into Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, I decided I wanted to go there and do illustrations. So I was doing these kinds of illustrations. This is back in the late 80s. And I had a lot of blood in what I was doing. Professors even told me that I couldn't use red like ever again because of so much blood in my paintings, etc. But just before I graduated, I authored and illustrated a children's book that got published. So I spent some time doing a book tour, very modest proportions, to sell this book around places. But I wasn't getting much of a career in terms of illustration. Essentially, there wasn't that big of a market for people doing bloody dismemberment and gored people. So wasn't quite working out for me, so I bought this car. This is a 1976 Chevy Caprice Classic with a 454 cubic inch truck engine in it. Not that that's important. But I lived out of it for 40 days and 40 nights, seeing if I could have some kind of biblical revelation, living out of my car and driving around the country. And it turned out that there were some revelations. I realized that I really did want to make my own work, and I wanted to be an artist. But going to an art school was a little bit different for somebody who studied illustration. So I initially started making paintings like these. This is about 4 feet by 4 feet. This is about 1992, about 100 years ago. And what happened was I would actually just stand on a ladder and pee on the canvas and pour other bodily fluids on it and then other pigments and see what would happen. They're really terrible paintings, but it was a good way for me to kind of break out of who I was. And I was really into investigating all kinds of things where I was trying to figure out what was going on with the universe. So this is a drawing. It's graphite. It's on paper. It's about 20 inches tall. And in the lower right corner there, you can see a little self-portrait peeking below the hat. So I was very much into like alchemy and trying to solve the universe. And I was fascinated with anyone throughout history who was trying to solve the universe as well. So I did all kinds of things and experiments to try to see the world differently. On the left, you see this. This is a graphite drawing. It's about maybe 8 inches by 10 inches on paper. And it's a distorted image on the left. But if you take a cylinder that has a mirror on it on the right-hand side and you place it in the middle, you can see that the distorted image corrects itself into a pyramid and a medallion and an origami crane. And this process is called catroptic anamorphosis. So I was thinking about, how do people look? How do people perceive the world? How do I perceive the world? So I went to grad school at Northwestern University in Chicago and studied under James Valerio, who's a very well-known realist painter. And they hated what I was making. So one day I made a still life painting. This is about 7 inches by 4 inches. It's oil paint. And I painted just a piece of duct tape sitting on the wall. And they really loved it. They thought it was a great painting. And I was just basically like trying to piss them off. So then I made another painting, which is about 20 inches tall. And this was oil on panel as well. And so I painted a painting of the original duct tape on the wall, and then I painted a painting of the painting that I made of the original duct tape on the wall and put both of those in a painting for critique. And so everybody hated me even more, which is just awesome. So when I got out of grad school, I got a show in Chicago, a solo exhibition, and I started working on this series of works where I was trying to figure out questions about the universe again. What was my place in the universe? I'm always wondering, you know, am I doing the right thing? What am I doing here? What am I supposed to do tomorrow? What are we all supposed to do tomorrow? And all those kinds of things. And sometimes I think that with my weird eyes, my weird vision, that I can actually see things in the world that other people can't. So when I find little objects that speak to me and whisper to me, like this is a snake rib and a little shell, and this is an oil painting. It's about 8 inches by 10 inches. I try to paint them and tell their story. And I think it's really, for me, it's important to do so. People, I don't know about people or what they think. They just kind of look at me funny. This is another one that I did. It's about 10 inches by 8 inches. And the funny thing about this is that I was at an opening for this, and this elderly woman came up to me, and she was like, "Oh, wow, you know, I really love this thing." And we were talking about the fact that it's all shiny, and it's red, and it's like a vagina, and it's labial, and it's wet and sexual and all that stuff. And then she said, what's the meaning of the pin in the box? And I said, I don't know. I just found it on the road. And she goes, well, I know what it is. I said, oh, cool, what is it? And she goes, well, it's a Girl Scout pin. So, you know, that was an awkward moment. I learned to actually maybe investigate my objects a little bit further after that. But I was very into these things. There's like a ton of these. This is called Apis Vishnu, 10 inches by 8 inches. This is called in remembrance of the first time I learned that the universe is infinite, which is kind of like, you know, when you're a kid and your dad like takes you out and shows you this space through a telescope or something, and he's sitting there and he's like making up names of constellations and stuff, you know, he's like the Miller Lite cluster boy, you know, or whatever. And then he tells you that the universe is infinite. And you're like a kid and you go, oh, infinite, that's so cool. And they go, oh, no, it's infinite. It means, son, that the universe goes on forever and ever, and it's just utter blackness, and there's nothing out there for you. So that's kind of, that's my experience with my dad anyway. And this is a close-up. This is about 2 inches by 3 inches. This is my little beetle Otto. He's missing a head, so he doesn't know that he's missing out on that black hole, that he's circling the horizon, event horizon, is about to be sucked in the black hole. So I became a father, and when you have a kid and you're a father, you freak out, and you're responsible for this new human being doing things in the world. So this is a painting. This is 8 feet by 5 feet, and it's called Miles and Miles. It's all about those anxieties of fatherhood. I started really thinking about all the people that, as you get to be an adult and you have kids and everything else, people start dying, you start losing people, and you start thinking about meaning of life and what you're doing in life in a much deeper way. And this is an oil painting, 2 feet by 3 feet. This is one of my great mentors, Robert Brawley. And he finally, just before he died, he let me do this portrait of him. And and basically, this is kind of about a dream he had. He kept having this dream. It was very funny that he's a guy who actually would go down south to like South America, and he would imbibe in hypnotic, and hallucinogenic narcotics. And so he would have these visions, and he would come back and tell me about them. And in one of his visions, he felt like he had reached nirvana. And when he was ready to reach nirvana, he was reaching for the door, and instead he actually woke up from a dream within a dream, and he found himself, as he always did, naked in the lobby of Purgatory, passing out mints. Really influential guy. This is a detail that's about 2 inches by 3 inches. So you start to look at yourself, and if you're me, I started asking a lot of questions about myself. And so I actually built this 500-gallon tank in my studio in St. Louis, and I filled it with water and leaves. And I did these series of self-portraits, which is kind of about how I felt at the time about existing in between states of life. So you can see I'm half drowning and half waking. Began doing a series of paintings about revealing meaning in the universe. So as I'm doing this, I began thinking about, in deeper level, like, what am I really doing on the planet? And I decided that I really wanted to see the planet itself. So I was looking at all kinds of things, like, all these like shibboleth societies and the Hermetics and what they were thinking about in terms of how the universe functioned and how things came together and what systems worked. And in looking at these systems, I mean, these are ancient systems, And then this is like some of our contemporary systems on the left there, this and the right. These are trees that we design ourselves in science to explain evolution to us, to explain how we got here. And I'm always struck with how our systems that we design, that we think are very human and clever, relate really closely to what nature has already done. And in this case, what looks like a tree at the bottom is actually a satellite image from the 1970s of the Colorado River when it used to reach the Bay of California. And so I made a series of paintings about this kind of thing. They look like neurons, but they're all just trees I found. And there's a painting of that actual satellite image. So when you think about trees and satellite images, I started thinking about scale, and I started thinking about human scale. And so I did this drawing with about 80 students. This drawing is 85 feet long by 10.5 feet tall, and it's of a cylindrical projection of the Milky Way galaxy. It's pretty damn accurate, too. And this was involved, this is the installation of it. This is inside of a museum. And so we actually had this whole system set up where people got to experience what it was really about to be human and how special it was. So here's an instance here. If you look at this picture from the installation scale, all of those orange curtains in the background, those are basically 1 billion randomly generated stars that we printed. And you can actually see the stars. In the installation, you can see the stars themselves. We gave the little kids magnifying glasses, which I thought was awesome. And here they are like, oh, that's so cool. And, tutus were required for all children under the age of 6 to get in. So this is a picture from the Hubble Ultra Deep Field. And this is like basically, if you took a poppy seed off of a muffin and you held it up at arm's length against the night sky, this is how many galaxies it covers up. None of these are stars. These are all galaxies. There's over 25,000 galaxies just in this one image. Each one of those galaxies contains from 100 million to trillions of stars. So when you want to think about yourself in terms of your scale to the universe, let me put it this way. Like if you went out just into the Milky Way galaxy and you were just floating around and you were like George Clooney floating out there or something, and you were like, oh man, this is so cool, you would only have a 1 in 10 million chance at any moment of spotting a single atom. But if you look at the end of your pinky right now, I can't see you guys, but everybody hold up your pinky, and if you look at where the top of the pinky is, where the nail is, that's about a cubic centimeter of human flesh. And just in that cubic centimeter of human flesh, there are 44 trillion billion atoms, as compared with space. So you're all so special. So this is really fun because we actually had a bunch of people out to draw on it. Here's a bunch of astrophysicists, and then on the right is Seth Shostak in the blue jacket next to me in my scientist garb. And he actually is the director for research for extraterrestrial intelligence in the universe, and I made him draw on the drawing, and he made 2 little stars that he named for himself, which is pretty cool. Here's some of my kids that worked with it on me. So here's what happens. I'm the guy who has all the books that you want to check out of the library, and somebody already has them checked out, and you can't get them. I'm the guy who has those books, and I'm sorry about that. But they're all in my studio, and they'll have little tiny slips of paper in there. So what I finally did is I actually took all these books, and I finally took pictures of the images in the books and some of my own images, and I put them together in this 10-foot by 10-foot digital print of all the shit that's going on in my head at any given moment. So when people ask me what my work is about and why I'm an artist, I mean, it's tied into a lot of things, and I usually just give them this image, and I'm like, just think about this, and that's kind of close to what I'm making. So here's what I do. Like, I look at this. This is the Ring Nebula. It's like, I don't know how many millions of light years across, but it's insanely large. It's astronomical in scale. And this is actually the mineral pool at Yellowstone National Park, and it's about a 1/4 mile across. And then you look at this, and this is a diatom, which is one of the smallest creatures on the planet, and it's like, you know, a couple of nano whatever tiny things across. And so for me, I look at this and I'm like, wow, look at this diatom. It's like got green and blue, and it's got red and everything. And look at this, it's got like blue and green and orange. And look at this, and oh man. So that's what happens in my head. So when this happens in my head, I make a painting about it. So this is a series that I began and I'm working on now called Chroma. And you can see these details that look a lot like alluvial plains or natural phenomena that happen. And this is what the actual painting looks like. It's on aluminum composite panel, and it's about 3 feet by 3 feet. And this is just acrylic and water and resins and pigments and stuff. So, you know, you think about algae and all this stuff, and then I make a painting about it. Boom. Painting. Mines, chemical spills, painting. Nautilus shells, jet engines, painting. Green stuff, painting. Yeah, so this is really fun. Now, the other thing is that if you look in this painting and you look in the lower right-hand corner and you see all that kind of red-brown stuff, that's actually acid mine and drainage pigment. This is pigment that we've developed, and I don't know if Jay have told you anything about it, but anytime you see red-brown in my paintings now, these are all the paintings, by the way. They're pretty cool. I was never able to recreate this one. I love this one. Looks like an opal. I don't know what happened that day. It was really cool. So what happened is that I live in Ohio now. I'm not an Ohio native. Like I said, military all over the world, Kansas a little bit. I've been through Oklahoma a couple of times. I never stopped, except to get gas and once to run away from a tornado, I think. So maybe I did end up in Texas. I don't know. But so Ohio is coal country. So basically, there's all these green hills here, and it's like, oh, it's fantastic. It's so beautiful, your green hills. And the thing is that all those hills are hollow, and all the coal's been like mined out of them. This is what it looks like. They basically take all the easy coal that you can, and then they just abandon the mine. So when you abandon the mine, what happens is rainwater fills up the mine. All the acids that have been exposed, so mostly sulfuric acid, basically sulfuric acid eats into the coal, leaches heavy metals out of it, and you get these streams. If you look on the left here, that's basically oxide or ferric oxide, and then the lower one, that's aluminum or bauxite. And so this is what the streams look like, and they're horrible. And some of them really smell because of the sulfur, and nothing can live in them. They're biologically dead. But what we can do is, I mean, way back through history, you guys are art students. You know this now. Basically, you know, cave paintings and all this other stuff, they used basic fundamental iron oxides forever, clay, things they found along riversides, etc. And we actually use that in our paints that we make today, but the way we get our current iron oxide is we get it from China. And China buys scrap metal from us. They take it and they put it in these large pickling tanks, and they eat the metal away, and then they add another chemical to it, and they precipitate iron oxide crystals. So we do the same thing. This is from my lab, and from our lab rather. And so basically, Professor Guy Riefler, who is an environmental engineer, and myself, we actually collect this toxic river water, and we test it out, and we make pigments out of it that we can use in paintings. And so that's Guy. This is our mainstream where we get our stuff from. This is called True Town. And we can literally get a ton of pigment a day out of this stream. It's that polluted. It's that toxic. Here's an interesting thing. This is actually a blueprint of the coal mine where True Town is. And you can see where all those little like white lines are. Those are actually holes where they carved out the coal. And here's what it looks like just a few years later. And they did this whole second level on here, which is amazing. And then all this was abandoned. So this is True Town site. This is actually what it looks like. And this is somebody's backyard. They had this backyard. Everything was cool. And then suddenly, about 15 years ago, this well burst up out of their yard and started reeking of sulfur and killing off all the life in the forest behind them. So if you look, there's Columbus. Some of you may have heard of Columbus, Ohio. And then if you look south there to that little red Google Maps dot, that's where we actually collect our water from. And so there's True Town. And all of the green to the left of this, where you see that 301 highway, 409 highway, and 299 highway, all those green hills, those are completely hollow. That's all coal mines. And if you look a little bit closer down there, you can see where the hills stop right there by that road. And then there's this person's house. And in the wooded area to the right, where this little triangle is over there, that's where it actually bleeds out of the yard. So this is what we do, is we take these stuff out of there, and these are our tests for the paint. We make these paints out of it. So this is my studio last summer. We make paintings out of it. I'm making these paintings right now, which is resonance, which is very, very cool. And there's a theory called constructall theory. And the constructall theory is the idea that in any system, whether it's natural or animate or inanimate, in order for that system to maintain its life, it has to create ever more efficient ways of bringing resources to it. And so the constructall theory says they're all related. So if you look at this on the right, that is a photograph of a neuron in the human brain, and on the left is a small town. I love this kind of stuff. So I started making on this constructall idea. So if you look at a close-up like this of a painting, and you look at this, which is a satellite image of a desert, they kind of look really similar to me. And so I make a painting about it, and this is that painting. It's basically tree bark, but it's actually oil and acrylic on panel. So think about, like, say, galaxies or hurricanes or nautiluses or fiddlehead ferns, and they all take this kind of shape. So the constructall theory says there's a reason that we find this shape in nature, and there's a reason that it still exists, and that's because it forms an economic function to maintain life. Same thing with a river delta on the left. This is the Ganges River Delta on the left, and on the right is basically, it's the human lung, and it's how we get oxygen into our system. Very similar. If you guys are conspiracy theorists, like, your head's ringing right now. And so I use these same kind of patterns in the paintings I'm making. These are 12 inches by 12 inches mixed media on panel. So take a look at this one. This is actually an optic nerve. And then when you look here, this is one of the paintings we're making. So this is a close-up. This one is about maybe 1 inch by 1.5 inches. And this is about 2 inches by 3 inches. And then a little bit bigger. And this is what the full painting looks like. To create these textures on here, and you can see how thick the texture is there. We're actually using acrylic gels and a reticulation press technique to do it. Here's a satellite image of a river basin. I think they're very similar. Satellite image of Arctic ice. And then here's a painting we made. Yeah. Leaf, leaf, leaf. Bark, leaf, glow. So here's the thing, is like, usually when I talk to people about this stuff, students are always asking me, like, well, what can I do? Like, you're doing this thing where you're cleaning up these toxic streams in Ohio. What can I do where I am and everything else? And I'm here to tell you that local is global. This is the Gavin coal-burning power plant. It's exactly 30 minutes from the door of my house to the door of this coal-burning plant. It's the largest class of coal-burning power plant allowed to be built in America. Every day they burn 17 barges of coal, which is amazing. And so this is the area where we harvest, where all the coal is from, and this is where we get our pigments from. So, and this is a tiny area. It's just a couple of counties big. It's very small. But then if you look at where it is, in the lower right hand, where it says Hocking River, this is rivers and tributary systems of Ohio that connect to each other and connect to the area where we clean up. And then if you look here, this is basically, there's Ohio in the middle, Indiana to the left, and the other states surrounding it, and these are all the tributaries that feed into the Ohio. And then you look where the Ohio connects to the Mississippi. This is all the river tributaries that feed into the Mississippi from the Ohio region, where we're working. And this is the area and all the tributaries in the United States that feed into the Mississippi, then dump into the Gulf of Mexico. This is where the Gulf of Mexico meets all of the Gulf streams and currents of the world. So if you think about it, working on a tiny stream from a coal mine in Ohio affects the entire world and the entire ocean. And maybe by the time all of this toxicity from the coal mine reaches like the Gulf of Mexico, it's, what, 1 part per billion, Well, what if we did something different, and instead of thinking of it's only a little pollution, what if we thought about removing that pollution, making those streams biologically viable, and therefore, instead of putting 1 part per billion of bad stuff in the ocean, we put 1 part per billion of good stuff. I don't know, that's how my mind works. So here's the thing. It's like, local is global. So if you're there in Oklahoma, anything that's around there, if you do something, it can really work. This is a weird thing. I'm just in Ohio. I'm making this stuff, whatever. And these people from Al Jazeera America, a cable channel, flew a crew out from Los Angeles to film me at my work because they heard about the process. This is going to air in a couple of weeks, so who knows what can happen. I was making all these paintings, and then, you ever have a friend who's like, oh, can you just do me a favor? Can you come over and just like meet with my friend, or just come do this thing for me or whatever? And you don't really want to do it. You don't want to do it, but you got to be cool with your friends. You're like, okay. So a friend of mine asked me to give a talk at a Rotary Club. Never been to a Rotary Club meeting. Don't know anything about it. But it's really weird. They have like, leftover, I don't know, cream corn in like a heated bowl, and everybody has like little plastic cups with like Pepsi or like, off-brand Pepsi, Then they have these placemats that say all these weird things. And it's like 3 people who are 100 years old, and you're like giving your talk, and, people are falling asleep and spilling like baked beans in their lap and everything, So I did this talk, whatever. And then I get a call out of the blue, and one of the Rotary guys, who I thought was sleeping through my lecture, turns out he was friends with the senator. He called the senator, and so the senator came to my studio, and it turns out that he's the head of the Department of Natural Resources funding. So basically, at this point, we may be able to clean up 800 million gallons of toxic water because the senator came to my studio and saw my work because some old guy at a Rotary Club in a small town in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, decided it was cool. So, whatever you're doing locally, you can do it. This is a class that the person who's in the room with you was in. This is a class called Save the World, and she can tell you all kinds of lies about it at another time. But basically, this whole project where we got the college involved, we got the students involved. And so one of the other things that I do to bring the community together is one of my students started a school in New York called Scribble Art Workshop for kids. And so I'm an advisor to her and to the school, and I train my students, and I send my students to New York to work as teachers for her. And what we do is, you know, public school. Look at this badass. Look at her. Such a badass, man. So the New York public school system leaves a lot to be desired, and they don't really have much arts. So we provide the arts for the kids. We have 6 locations. We have about 300 students right now. And we're not training them to be artists. We're just training them to trust themselves and be creative, which is very cool. And at the end of every term, our students make artwork. We partner with a local business, and we auction off the artwork to raise money for scholarships because our school is in a mixed neighborhood where we've got some, you know, government housing on one side and we've got some nicer housing on the other side. So it allows us to have the kids who can't afford it to come to school. So here's the thing. I'm basically all about us doing better in the world, and I'm all about you doing better in the world. Basically, you guys remember Occupy Wall Street? Anybody remember that? Okay, so a bunch of rich kids who didn't have jobs hung out in Zuccotti Park in New York and complained about several million things, and were made fun of by the media, which is awesome. But out of that, a couple of things came out, and this is where you come in. One of the things they figured out, and this was the first time this really happened, they figured out a couple of years ago through the Occupy Wall Street movement that ordinary American citizens, particularly young Americans, i.e. you guys, have a way of connecting organically through social media, whether that's Twitter or Snapchat or anything, that's more efficient than the government. And so you get Occupy Sandy relief, where basically the federal government did what it could, and Red Cross did what it could to help all the victims caught up in Hurricane Sandy on the East Coast. But nobody was more effective than the Occupy Sandy movement, which was started with people who went to the Occupy Wall Street. So what they would do is they would actually text each other and be like, oh my gosh, I'm over here in New Jersey and these people need boats now. And boom, everybody got on their phones, got together, texted the people they knew, boats got to the people to be rescued who needed it faster than any government could, faster than fire department, police, anything. So this is interesting. So when you look at that, they got food where it needed to go, they got donations where it needed to go. You know, instead of just getting like a giant bag of rice, they asked people what they really needed and went out and got what they needed based on people who were on the ground and texting them. So, you know, this year there was basically Flood the Wall Street. Same people, same kind of movement. We were really talking about this time climate change. And the interesting thing is that, you know, I don't know if you guys remember this happening this fall. Shar, you probably remember this meme, right, of the guy in the polar bear protesting getting arrested. It's very cool. Sort of like, you know, that's like the highlight of your life right there. So the thing is that, like, you know, well, back to this climate change thing, and I'm almost done here if you guys are still awake. Thing is that this climate change march was so effectively organized, and it was so large, and it was so impactful, and people could see that. The new generation was so invested in climate change as an important issue that the Rockefeller Foundation has now divested itself of all fossil fuels. That's insane. That's never happened in history before. It's huge and it's massive. And it's due to this kind of organic, social media, young generation organization. Now, out of all this basically comes another organization, because some of the people involved in Occupy Wall Street, they were also bankers. And the real thing that came out of Occupy Wall Street is we wanted to change the banking system. They wanted to change it so it was fair, and so that it wasn't like a closed system that fed itself and had its own insurance as being taxpayer money. I think most of us can get behind that. So what they decided is they started looking at debt. And here's an interesting thing. If you were a millionaire and you owed like $10 million, right? If you were like, oh, I got $10 million. I owe $10 million on a credit card. You can actually go onto the debt market and you can buy back your own debt for, like, say, $500,000 and pay it off. But if you're like, and you're regular, let's say you have a mortgage is like, I don't know, $50,000, and the bank's like, we want that $50,000, and you don't have it. So what they do is they sell that $50,000 to collection agencies. And they won't sell it for $50,000. They'll sell it to the collection agencies for about, pennies on the dollar, like, $1,000, they'll sell the $50,000 in debt for. And you can't have it. You're still going to have to pay back $50,000, which is sort of like, thanks so much. So Strike Debt is an organization that came out of Oxford Wall Street. What they did is they formed themselves as a debt collection agency, and they take donations, and they buy debt on the debt market and just pay it off. That's it. And they send them a letter that says, hey, we paid off your debt, which is really cool. But there's only one kind of debt that you can't sell, that you can't bankrupt out of or anything else, and that affects you, and that's student loans. Now, unless all of you guys are rich, you're probably going to come out of college with a little bit of debt, or you've taken a loan out for something, Here's an interesting question. What if everyone who took out a college loan, what if every one of you decided at the same time to boycott paying back your loan until you got a fair interest rate? Now that might seem like it'd be crazy, but what if you did Occupy Wall Street style, And you texted everyone and you created this organization. Everyone who ever had debt knew, and created this organic organization. And basically, you guys who owe $1.2 trillion in student debt would all of a sudden on one day say, no thank you, we're not going to pay it back. What are the banks going to do? The banks are going to crap their pants is what they're going to do. And then you can be like, and so people can be like, oh, but you know what's going to happen is like, the bank's going to come and repossess my car because I'm not paying the student loans, or whatever. And then like, my position, that's how you guys organize. Like, if you're down the street and the repo man comes, you get on Snapchat, you get on Twitter, and you're like, hey man, repo man's at my house, and then all your student loan owing neighbors run down there and surround your house and are like, you're not taking his car, man, The banks would get it really quickly. I guarantee it'd take 30 days and we'd have whole new laws and student loans would cost like $1. Anyway, something for you to think about. Because they just do. I mean, these online universities that rip people off and they're like a bunch of lying cheats and everything else. Not good universities like, Northwestern Oklahoma University. But, like Everest Institute and all these little weird places, they basically, they prey on underprivileged and they make them take out a bunch of loans and they sack them full of debt. So Strike Debt actually has started buying off the debt from some of these colleges that have been found to be doing illegal activities and paying off their student debt, man. So I don't know. I'm not telling you have to do this. I'm just saying this is what happens when I'm in a studio by myself. So that's my lecture. Thanks for being here.
That was great, John. Does anybody have any questions for John that they'd like to ask? I think you might need to walk up to the computer here.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a question? So the question is, how long does your painting take to create?
A very long time. What does she want or he want? Hours, days?
Either.
How long do you average on average?
Hey, JV. Tell him to come over here. Let me see your face. Yeah, get over here.
Okay, I'm coming. All right. So on average, how long do you spend?
Hold on.
Okay, I'm sorry.
What's your name?
Willow.
Okay, hi Willow. You look totally like a willow. That's a good name for you. Okay, now ask your question again.
How long on average do you spend on each of those paintings? Those are incredible. They just...
Thanks. Here, I'll give you a tour. There, so this is what I'm working on right now. Like a big leaf here. So this one I started in August.
Oh wow!
And I work on a lot of paintings at once. Here, this is my studio, guys. So there's a lot of paintings going on at one time, you know. This is a painting called Godzilla. Because, you know, it looks like Godzilla's skin, you know? It's like totally Godzilla. But basically, like, so one of those would probably take a couple 100 hours, you know? Something like that. Long time. Smaller ones, like this guy right here, this would probably take, you know, maybe 2 weeks, and maybe, like, you know, working in 3-hour sessions for every other day for like 2 weeks, something like that.
Not too terrible.
It'd take a while, but I'm super anal retentive, so you know.
That's really neat. I like. So what inspired you for nature stuff? Because I see you have a lot of leaf paintings that you're incorporating the different things you see around you. But why the nature aspect now?
You know, I grew up, maybe, I don't know where you guys live in Oklahoma. You guys probably live in different places. But when I grew up, we got in the back of the pickup and we went out to, you know, camp. We didn't have any money. That's what we did, you know. So I've always had this really good feel for nature. It's necessary for me, or I freak out. If I don't see mountains, I mean, you guys are out there in the flatlands, man. But if I don't see the mountains, I die. Like, I have to see mountains. I feel all wrong inside, you know. So basically, for me, once I started looking at that and I just feel the way I feel in nature, again, it's about systems. If you look at a tree or you look at a stream or you look at a leaf, I feel like there's some kind of magic there, like a deep, deep, deep magic, and I want a piece of it. And I can't really get a piece of it, so I just uselessly make paintings about them.
They're really neat. I like that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? I'll come back into the screen. Well,
Who does he look up to now?
Lauren's asking, who do you look up to now? Who's your hero?
Who I look to? Oh man.
Artist, maybe.
Artists.
Or science.
Artists. Yeah. That's a tough one, but I mean,
Okay. Artists
yeah.
and scientists.
Okay. Yeah. That's tough. I mean, it's tough because basically I've got all these solvents in my studio, so my brain is, you know, not operating fully. I've been hiding for a long time in the studio now, so. But there's these guys that are working on working with thorium. Have you ever heard of thorium? It's a radioactive. It's a radioactive metal, and basically it has the potential to be to give us all the energy we'd ever friggin' need, cleanly, without all of the radiation excess that we have from the uranium that we're using now and plutonium and this kind of stuff. So I love those guys, which is really awesome. And anybody who's working on any kind of sustainable energy source, I'm all into that. So anybody who's working with like algae farms or wind farms or anything else, I can't get enough of that. In fact, once the show goes up, I'm going to try to actually make one of them pay me to be like an artist in residence for their company or something, and just, I don't know, maybe they can build a windmill in my front yard, you know.
Have you ever worked with or know of Mel Chin's work?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, because I see some similarities between your work and some of the stuff that he does, as far as the environmental concerns goes.
Oh, yeah, early on when he did the chain link fence and he planted all those different plants in the Superfund site to see what would grow,
Yeah.
fantastic. And there's a Vietnamese artist who also, he grows these little tiny two-prong plants, and it turns out that it cleans the wastewater there better than chemicals.
Yeah.
And so he builds these beautiful like waterways that clean the water naturally with this plant in it. Oh, man, it's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I really don't have any more questions for you, but do you have a question? You just gave me this look.
Just glanced.
Okay. But John, thank you. This was a really fantastic work and very inspiring. There's a lot of stories that's really funny and really relatable and very quite well researched, and you should definitely be praised and admired for what you do. So thank you, John.
Well, thanks for having me, Jay.
Yeah. All right. Then we're signing off on this end. Thank you again for joining us. This has been Northwestern Oklahoma State University, and today was John Sabraw. Thank you again.
Thanks, guys. Bye.